Welcome, everyone, humans, other than human. We are so glad that you are all here today at the Compassion Consortium. I am Reverend Sarah Bowen, an animal chaplain and interspecies minister. I'm joined today by co-founders Reverend William Milton, Reverend Erica Allison, Victoria Moran. And as always, we're grateful that Phil is busy steering us around in the Zoomosphere. I'd also like to give a warm welcome to all of you and to our guest today. We meet the fourth Sunday of every month, and we hope to see you often. We're coming up on our 1-year anniversary in April. And you may have heard we've been officially approved for 501c3 nonprofit status. Yay! So we owe a big round of applause to Reverend William for this. He is the wizard behind the curtain who keeps the Compassion Consortium running and growing in all the ways that are so essential and aren't always seen. So I just wanted to take a moment and lift that up today. And I also want to thank the folks at the Animal Legal Defense Fund for generously offering their guidance to William and the rest of us through this process. There's a lot of paperwork, and they were very helpful. Over the past year, many of you have asked about how you can belong to the consortium. And as I teed up in December, we've been thinking about what belonging means in relation to this community. So soon we're going to be rolling out some very creative ideas for you. Keep your eye out for the newsletter this month. If you're not getting the newsletter, go to compassionconsortium.org, right at the top, sign up. We only send it out once a month, but that's how you can keep up to date on our events. So today I'm speaking to you from Rhinebeck, New York, the land cherished by the Munsee Lenape, a land currently covered with a heck of a lot of snow. My yard is a labyrinth of hoof prints and paw prints and claw prints. It's 22 degrees Fahrenheit and everyone is trying to stay warm. A case in point, the squirrels here have cut my Tibetan prayer flags free and hauled them up into their dray. They're kind of flapping around still in the tree, right out of a big mess of sticks and twigs and other goodies that they have collected from the yard. I think perhaps it's a remarkable nod to their kin in the Himalaya, the 3-foot-long Yunnan woolly flying squirrel, who lives in areas that are uninhabited by humans, lucky them, where they guide through the air at night, courtesy of their massive furry tails. Did you all catch that I said they are 3 feet long? I need to see these squirrels. I missed you all last month, and I want to thank Victoria and Erica for shifting gears very quickly as William and I both found ourselves in precarious medical situations. At the time of the service, I was laid up in a hospital bed, having a very nervous conversation with a cardiologist. As often happens in hospital stays, I was hooked up to a number of different machines and subject to a lot of tests. And although I was delighted that the hospital offered me a vegan diet and even wrote it up on the board next to my name and my nurse's name and all the important information, each time a new test arrived, I wondered about the potential impact on animals, because my definition of living a compassionate life includes trying to live nonviolently without harming other beings. I think that's perhaps the trickiest area in this endeavor for me is medical care. Animal exploitation is often invisible there. I have to ask a lot of questions, do a lot of sleuthing, and it's not always easy. While I was lying in that bed, worrying about my heart, I recalled a conversation I had had the prior week. I was speaking with someone at a religious-based university about a research project that I'm working on that has to do with the intersection of religion and animals. After describing my project to her, this woman, who did not know me from Adam and did not know me from Eve for that matter, remarked, "Did you hear they saved a man's life with a pig heart? Isn't that amazing?" I paused and I took a deep breath. And I took a second deep breath. And I thought about how I could frame my response to this woman with a Catholic worldview that would be compassionate for her and at the same time, compassionate for pigs. So here's how I responded. I said, it is amazing that's possible. And yet, here's what concerns me. I see huge windowless buildings with rows and rows of pigs in captivity in tiny cages who are scared and confused without the ability to have a full life because humans are waiting to use them for parts. And I wonder, is that what a loving and compassionate God would want? How does that relate to the story we read in Genesis? And then I stopped and I felt the tension of silence in the air. And I felt my words sink in. And she said, I hadn't thought of that. And I replied, you're not alone. These are very messy conversations when it comes to life or death situations. And that's why I do the work that I do. And during that conversation with her, I firmly believed I would personally never take a pig's heart under any circumstances, ever, ever, ever. And now a week later, here I was, placed within a different context. I was scared and I was alone with too much time on my hands. I thought about all the things that I wanted to do with my life. I thought about the fact that I just got an AARP card and I wasn't real excited about that. I wondered, would I be able to turn down that procedure if it meant I could live? My emotions sank. My head hurt with ethical cognitive dissonance. How could I be thinking that? And on the other hand, how could I not be thinking that? I thought about my heart, how it pumps blood, how it helps circulate my oxygen, how it's been linked with love for eons, especially by Plato, who attributed our chest not only to love, but also fear, anger, rage, and pain. I recalled some words from the 7th century poet Sappho, who lived on the island of Lesbos, where she wrote over 10,000 lines of passionate poetry, including this one. Love shook my heart, like the wind on the mountain, troubling the oak trees. My heart was shaken, both physically and emotionally. Did you know there's actually a medical basis for the feeling of a broken heart? It's called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. I had to hyphenate that so I could pronounce it. It can happen when the heart muscle becomes suddenly stunned or weakened following a severe emotional or physical stress, like the loss of a loved one. Basically, you get a sympathetic urge of so many hormones that it stuns the heart and it stops functioning properly. It's often recoverable, but it can have lasting issues. Now, that's not what I ended up having, but it gave me another thing to think about: how our lives affect our hearts. So in the end, it turned out that my heart is doing fine, and I'm grateful to be here with you all. I've learned that I need to cut down on caffeine. I need to pull one of Victoria's great books on nutrition off of my bookshelf and get rid of some of the vegan junk food that I love so much, especially during a pandemic, for comfort. I have to realize that some of the foods that I love because they're cruelty-free may be good for animals, but they're not so good for me. And I need to stop emailing until midnight. And I need to reinvigorate my yoga practice. In other words, I need to ensure I am compassionately tending to my own heart. Now, I'm grateful that I did not have to choose between my life and the life of an animal. And I am also grateful in hindsight that I got to spend 48 hours in really focused inquiry about what that decision might be like from an insider's point of view. I also got to do a lot of advocacy in that hospital talking about pig hearts. Some people were willing to have that conversation, other people not so much, but it made the time pass. Now, curiously, William faced a similar dilemma during his medical mess, and he joins us today. I love this, all collared up in his hospital bed. And he's going to share a little bit about his story before I wrap up our opening remarks.
Yes, I am coming to you from a hospital bed, but I'm wearing my clerical collar, so it's all okay. So it's a long story, but I'm going to make it short. Um, Around about the first week of January, I developed an infection in my foot, and it got a lot worse, actually. And it ended up being a bone infection. And Dr. Mills would know the name for that. I've forgotten what it is. I know it starts with an M, and then it developed into sepsis. And that's actually pretty serious. And so Victoria was kind enough to nag me incessantly to go to the hospital. And I finally did. And when I got there, the doctor had the audacity within 1 hour to amputate my toe, my big toe, my most important toe. So it was mostly my fault. And so, you have to live with the bad decisions that you make. And that's what I'm doing now. I get out of the hospital in 3 days. And I would just like to say probably my very favorite Bible verse is Galatians 6:7, which is, do not mock the Lord, for you shall reap what you have sown. I have a slightly different version of that, and that is, do not mock the doctor, for you will reap what you have sown. And in closing, I'll just say that the doctor has told me that if my wound does not heal on its own, he will do a skin graft and he will use cod skin. So that's the future battle I will have to fight, perhaps. And that's the whole story.
Thank you, Reverend William. We have so much to think about. So I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion fellowship at the end of today, and I hope you'll all stick around to talk about all these dilemmas. And I should warn you that I convinced William to let me play you all a pretty cheeky song of compassion today. So if it seems a little different than what we usually play, you can chalk it up to us just needing a little bit of lightheartedness this month, and we'll get back to the other kind of music next month. In our spiritual interview today, we'll further investigate some of the links between invisibility, animals, human health, and I can think of no better people to lead this conversation today than Victoria and Dr. Milton Mills. So, as my favorite pig taught me, that's all, folks. Back to you, Reverend William.
So now is the time when we read our Tenets of Agreement. And today we have with us Fredessa Jowden. Fredessa is a registered nurse enjoying the physical vitality and mental clarity of a vegan lifestyle in Sarasota, Florida. And she has been part of the Compassion Consortium family since its launch. And she's a current student at Main Street Vegan Academy, my wife's Vegan Academy, working toward her vegan lifestyle coach and educator certification. So, Fredessa, I'm going to turn it over to you now to read our Tenets of Agreement.
We acknowledge a divine force at the heart of the universe and in all living beings. We may refer to this force as God, but it is known by many names and appears in different forms or as formless. We recognize the common moral principles inherent within all wisdom traditions. We affirm that compassion, reverence for life, and nonviolence are fundamental to religious faith and moral philosophy, and are to be extended to all sentient beings. We stand by the principles of inclusion, diversity, and equality, and hold these as essential in our human relations. We hold that non-human animals are imbued with the same essence of life and love as are human animals, and that there is moral parity between us. We avow that humans do not own the earth, its resources, or its inhabitants, but instead must be involved in their protection and care. We endeavor to eat and live in a kind and sustainable manner, moving away from animal foods and animal-derived clothing, as well as any activities that cause harm to our fellow beings, human or otherwise. We aim to provide spiritual comfort, fellowship, and food for thought to those practicing or exploring a vegan lifestyle. We offer guidance and peer support for all those seeking a more compassionate and spiritual life. We commit to sharing these principles freely, with humility and respect, in support of non-human animals and the earth.
Thank you very much for this.
All right, so we are moving on to now, it is time for our interspecies spiritual practice. And this is the part in our service where we give everyone a chance to just go into their own experience. And we also invite other species to join us in these spiritual practices. So today I'm very excited to bring you, this one is called Touching the Earth. And if you were with us last month, you know that we did a small tribute to Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk who passed away last month. And this is a practice that actually comes from the Plum Village tradition, which is the tradition of Buddhism that Thich Nhat Hanh started. And the intention of this practice and why I'm choosing it today is this is a very deep practice for grief or for loss. And as we know, there's much going on in the world right now, from pandemics to war, and today's topic, which is health and wellness. So I want to teach you this practice if you're not familiar with it. We're going to practice it now as a tool that you can use as you are processing the heavy emotions of this time. And I hope you enjoy it. So Phil, if you want to pull up our video. So this practice does require, and don't start it yet, Phil, I'm just going to give a quick intro. So this practice does require movement. When it's called touching the earth because we're actually going to do a physical movement where we bend down to the ground and release into the earth. And so if you feel comfortable now in this moment to adjust yourself so that you can stand up and then bend down and touch the earth, I invite you to do that. If that doesn't feel comfortable for you, I invite you to observe along with us and maybe use your, your intuition and your mental, your third eye to imagine yourself doing this practice along with us. So Phil, if you want to go ahead and roll the video. The first part of this video I want to show you is actually how the technique works. So the first thing you'll do is you'll put your hand in either a prayer position, or in Buddhist philosophy, they put it in the position of a lotus flower. And I'm going to ring a bell. And when I do, we'll go down to the earth. And the key is to get all four parts of yourself to touch the earth, and a fifth part, your forehead. So it would be 2 feet, 2 legs, 2 hands, and your forehead. And then I'll ring a bell again when it's time for us to stand back up. So this one does require a bit of movement. And like I said, if this feels like something you'd like to try, I invite you to do it. If not now, perhaps another time when you feel ready. So if I could invite you now to just, if you're standing, just bring your awareness into your body, feel your feet on the ground. And for this first touching of the earth, we're going to be thinking about ourselves as a tree. And one of the reasons we suffer, and I'll go ahead and ring the bell if you'd like to go ahead and touch the earth. So go ahead and go down and touch the earth. One of the reasons we suffer is we think of ourselves as separate beings, like a tree in the forest, but without roots. And so in this first touching of the earth, we want to honor one of the roots that keeps us anchored and connected to each other, because that's where we find our strength. So as you're touching the earth now in this first touching, just allow the earth to feed back to you an awareness of your ancestors, your blood ancestors, your family. And I'm going to ring the bell again. And go ahead and stand up wherever you are in that practice. Now just take a moment to center yourself again. And we're going to go and now give tribute to the second root that keeps us strong and connected. And this second root is the ancestors of the land that we're on. So if you're ready now, I'm ringing the bell again. So go ahead and gently go down again. And this time, feel your connection to the earth as you bring into your mind the land ancestors, those who have shared this land before us, and those who we can still connect to this day as we feel alone, as we feel disconnected. Just know as we lean into this earth that the earth ancestors are here supporting us. The land ancestors, the wisdom of the earth, of the elements is here with us, and we can release and relax into the strength of this connection. Now, when you're ready, just gently stand back up. Just take a breath now and bring this practice so far that we've done into your body. And we're now going to honor the third root that keeps us from being separate individuals. This is the root of our spiritual teachers and our spiritual ancestors. So as we prepare now to touch the earth on this third time, bring to mind those teachers, and I'll ring the bell. Bring to mind those teachers, those spiritual guides. Perhaps it's books you've read or others who are here in your awareness, offering you spiritual support. And knowing this is an interspecies practice, also bring to mind any of these ancestors. Maybe they be family ancestors, land ancestors, and spiritual ancestors who come from the other than human world. Bring them to your awareness as well in this moment. And just feel yourself leaning on the strength of these roots as we stand together. Now we have a few more to do, but as you're standing in this moment, I want you to just feel into the solidity and the strength of these roots that we've just cultivated. Our blood families, our land ancestors, and our spiritual ancestors. Because on this next touching of the earth, we're actually going to lean on that strength. And now we're going to send love and energy to all those places in the earth that need compassion right now. So just begin to bring to mind those places in the earth that need compassion, those who are suffering, humans, animals, other beings, the planet. Just really feel the earth. And this is a time when, if you feel comfortable, you can even release some tears into the earth, feeling the strength of the earth, holding you, holding your grief, holding your sorrow, holding your longing for compassion for these beings that are currently suffering. Just feeling that connection with the earth in this moment and knowing that it can hold you as we stand together. Just taking a breath now in this practice. We have 2 more to do. Now this next one, we're actually going to bring awareness this time to those who are perpetrating the suffering. So this time as we lean into the earth, just feeling yourself surrendering now into the strength and solidity of the earth as you send energy and send wishes to those who are causing harm. May those who are causing harm be free of fear, be free of suffering, so that they can no longer be the perpetrators of such violence and such harm in the world. Fill their hearts with love as we send out our love to these beings. May they be relieved of their own suffering, because we know that through their liberation, that's how we find liberation for ourselves and other beings. And I'm just taking a moment to admire your strength in this moment, and your will and your power to continue going. We have 1 more to do, and this last one we're just going to bring to mind our gratitude and our identity. As we go down for our last touching of the earth, just bring awareness to the connection of who you really are beyond these bodies that we are inhabiting, with this limitless existence that we each are, and the interbeing and the interconnectedness that we have with every other living being on this planet. Feel that expansiveness. Feel your heart expanding and connecting with each other, with other beings, and just knowing that we are far more expansive and less limited than we allow. And when you're ready, you stand back up. That was our last one. So take a breath, give yourself an acknowledgement of gratitude, whether it be a bow or a hand to your heart, and just really feeling the fruits of that practice. Like any spiritual practice, it's the harvesting of the moments right after the practice where the richness lies. So just taking a second in this moment to thank yourself for this practice, for being present, for all of the energy that you just transmitted out into the world, and know and trust that these practices and these efforts and these intentions do matter and do ripple out into our planet. And so with that, I am very excited to bring forward Victoria, who will be interviewing our guest for today, Dr. Mills. Victoria, over to you.
A happy Compassion Consortium Day to everybody, and happy Black History Month and whatever else you might be celebrating right now. I think it's important to celebrate every day, even when there are things to be concerned about as well. So I am so excited to be introducing someone who needs no introduction, my really good friend, Dr. Milton Mills. You know him as a wonderful expert in the plant-based world and all kinds of documentary films. He is a practicing critical care physician in Washington, D.C., where he serves as medical director to both the U.S. Census Department and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And today we're going to be speaking with Dr. Mills in his role as a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, Dr. Mills, a lot of people who know you from the films you've been in, from your wildly popular YouTube channel, probably assume that you changed your diet because you're a doctor and you were hanging out with colleagues like Dean Ornish or Caldwell Esselstyn. But I happen to know that in your case, it happened because you'd been hanging out with God. Tell us about that.
Okay, I'll see if I can try to give the Reader's Digest version of this story, because heaven knows I could talk about this for half a day at least. The impetus was the fact that when I turned 13, my parents called us, and my brothers and I, and told us they were getting a divorce. And because they had not been at each other's throat and there was no acrimony, but they had decided for various reasons that they had grown apart and should be apart, this was a really rational and calm and for lack of a better expression, friendly decision on their part. But it came as a complete, it was like being hit by a meteor. I mean, my world exploded. And my response to that was to wonder, wow, was the rest of my life going to be this endless string of randomly, horribly painful events that I could not predict or avoid? Or was there some way of navigating life with the ability to understand how to maximize happiness and minimize pain? So I decided that the first thing I needed to do to answer that question was to answer the question, is God real? Because if God was not real, I didn't want to waste my life in an endless round of useless religious ceremonies that really amounted to nothing. But the opposite was equally true, that if God is real, then clearly it is absurd to try and live your life without acknowledging him and incorporating him into your life. And so I initially talked to clergy people from various denominations, and they told me a bunch of things that just didn't make sense. And when I would challenge them, they would tell me, well, you can't ask that question. You just have to accept what I'm telling you. And I immediately thought, why would God give me an intellect and then tell me not to use it? Which in retrospect, I realized that was the Holy Spirit guiding me. So I decided that, look, if God is real, then he ought to be able to show me what his word means. And so I said, God, I'm going to read the Bible and talk to you. And then you can show me what it means and what church I should belong to. And so that's what happened. I started reading the Bible, I started talking to God, and he started talking back to me. And it was a little scary at first, because I mean, if you guys know me, or if you've gotten to know me at all, you know that I'm a pretty, kind of upfront, hardcore guy. And I don't play games with myself. And I'm like, this is not me talking to myself. This is somebody else. And based on what was written in the Bible, the Seventh-day Adventist Church was the church that was most closely following what was written there. And one of the things that really impressed me about the church's teachings was the fact that they taught that we should be, and they encouraged members to become plant-based. They didn't require it. So they encouraged it, but did not require it. The only thing they required was that we abide by the biblical laws about leaving unclean animals alone. But it was up to us to decide when we were going to become plant-based. And since I had grown up eating all kinds of meat, and I didn't think I could live without a hamburger, I felt like, well, I've given up pork, I've given up ham, I've given up my mother's pork chops, I'm good. But about a year and a half into my relationship with God after joining the church, I was struggling with personal issues, and I was talking to God about it one night. And he said very clearly and very plainly, if you want a closer relationship with me, you need a clear mind. And for that, you need a better diet. You have to stop eating meat. And I remember that moment like it was yesterday, because I felt this panic. Like, how am I going to do this? I can't do this. But God had just said, if you want to get closer to me, you got to leave this alone and change your diet. So I just said, okay, God, if you want me to stop eating meat, take away the desire to eat it. And he did, and I stopped. And that was September of 1974.
That is so beautiful, because I have a concept in my life of healing at the desire level, because I used to be a practicing binge eater, and that was what happened for me too. That is so cool. Now, I know that you are really adamant that the Bible is crystal clear that humans should be vegan. And yet, I've been to a whole lot of Christian churches. I mean, Roman Catholic, Pentecostal, and all points in between. And I've never heard a sermon about that. So tell us where it comes from.
It's amazing. And it's really tragic that people who consider themselves Christian or God's people don't read his word. Because right up front in the very first chapter, in Genesis chapter 1, you get a condensed version of the creation story. And at the end, after he creates human beings, he tells us what to eat. Genesis 1:29, he puts us on a fruit-based diet. And again, one of the things that I loved about the way God revealed his word to me was that it wasn't a random collection of disconnected rules and regulations. It's a story that makes sense. And the story is that God created a perfect world where everything was plant-based. Humans messed that up. And instead of tossing the humans out with the messed up bathwater, God says, I got a plan to fix it. And when I fix it, we're going to get back to the place where to what I originally created. And the incredible and amazing thing was that his plan for fixing it was to take all of that responsibility and pain upon himself. the death, the dying, the struggle with learning how to overcome our habits. You know, he appointed himself our savior, our high priest, our counselor, and he did it. But right there, Genesis 1:29, he tells human beings, you're on a plant-based diet. Now, what's interesting is that after Adam and Eve sinned, in chapter 3, God enlarges the diet for humans. And that's because he had to bar their access to the fruit from the tree of life. Because we're told that the fruit of the tree of life has the ability to perpetuate life indefinitely. And when God and Jesus were talking, they said, look, we got to bar their access to this fruit, lest they put forth their hand and become eternally living sinners. So drive them from the garden. But God expands their diet and partially replaces, obviously, the nutrients that we would no longer be getting from the fruit of the tree of life by telling Adam and Eve, now you shall eat the plant of the field, which had formerly been reserved for the animals. And these are your legumes, your grains, green leafy vegetables, root vegetables. And what's really kind of cool is that when you look at human physiology and anatomy, we have the absorptive area of a frugivore that clearly has shown adaptation to a more starchy, vegetable, grain-based diet, which is exactly what the Bible says happened. But the fundamental point was that both before and after the fall, we were told to be strict vegetarians, or strict plant eaters, excuse me. And you know, humans were only given permission to eat animal tissue, and I think it was meant to be temporary after the flood, because when God brought Israel out of Egypt and controlled their diet, he made them strict plant eaters by feeding them manna, which David describes as a grain of heaven. We're told in Daniel, 1st chapter, that if we adhere to a plant-based diet, we will be healthier both physically, mentally, and spiritually. And then Isaiah chapter 11 tells us that when the earth is remade new and sin is banished from this planet, and you know, the earth is once again full of the knowledge of God, that everything will once again be plant-based. The lion will eat straw like the ox, and the bear will graze, you know, like lambs. And he says, none shall hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of God. So it's a really, really incredibly beautiful and straightforward story that is very clear what his desire is for us and what is best for us. And that the only reason he has allowed us to do something different was because we're so stubborn and hard-headed. And, you know, people might say, well, why did he do that? He could have, you know, most of us either have children or taking care of loved ones. And we put up with a lot of things from people we love, not because we want them to do it, but because, you know, we indulge them a little bit. And that's the way it was with the people demanding animal flesh.
So, Dr. Mills, with all this in there, with all this chapter and verse, why is it that certainly in the modern era, the only Christian denomination that is actively suggesting that their members be vegetarian or vegan is yours, the Seventh-day Adventists? Give us some history there.
Well, at the church came into being in the mid-19th century, mid-1800s. And out of the denomination, God raised a prophet, Ellen G. White, and he gave her visions of what his will was, not only for the church, but also about the future and about things like diet. And he revealed to her that what was in his word was what he wanted, and that we were designed for plant foods. And that is what we should be eating, and it is absolutely the best diet for us. And the only thing, I share your consternation that this is not more widely understood and practiced and talked about amongst the Christian denominations, because it's right there. And the only thing that I can kind of come up with is that Jesus said spiritual things are spiritually discerned. And we've all had that experience of something being right in front of us, but until our eyes are open, we simply can't see it. And I think part of it may be the fact that people's brains are so clogged up with grease and fat and cholesterol from eating at Popeyes, they don't understand a thing. But I think that when people really read God's word and they read it prayerfully, that his spirit will show them, boom, this is it. Because the only reason to continue doing what people are doing is because of the fact that human beings have become addicted to dining on the dead bodies of their fellow creatures. And it's heinous, it's sad, it's unfortunate. And, that's part of what God wants us to do. And that is enlighten people and raise their consciousness and point out the beauty of being spiritually in tune with him and with ourselves through a diet that promotes clarity of mind, spiritual connectedness and clarity. And that is the plant-based diet. And I'm telling you, once I changed my diet, I would say within 3 to 5 days, I started to feel the difference. I mean, it was crystal clear to me, wow, this is real. I felt so much better. I had so much energy. I needed less sleep. My acne disappeared. I'm like, this is the real deal. This is really healthier for us. And then that's what started me on my quest to really understand in as great a detail as possible how and why being plant-based was so healthy and appropriate for us, and then to try and take that information and put it in a form that other people could understand and access so that they could use that information to find their way.
Well, I would really recommend that anybody who's interested in either religious history or good health, that read Ellen G. White's Counsels on Diet and Food. It's so prescient. You could read this book and think you were reading something by one of our plant-based doctors 2022 and not a woman who claimed to be writing from Revelation in the mid 1800s. And while I'm recommending things to read, I see that Jeffrey Spritz Cohan from Jewish Veg is with us today, and they have the most wonderful infographic called What's Jewish About Veg that is really, really helpful with some of these biblical ideas. So Milton, I want to ask you a little bit of a maybe stickier question. Now, I do have to admit that I love a little bit of a mismatch. So a lace shirt with jeans, or a New Yorker who likes country music, or a Bible-based Christian who is a man of science. Now, that to me is like Willie Nelson playing Carnegie Hall, but that's you. How do you do it? And help us understand how those two things can juxtapose.
I love this question because I get asked this a lot. How can you be a Christian and believe in science? David said, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. And that is a very pregnant phrase, meaning that it is very deep and so much deeper than most of us really realize because we don't think about it. What it's telling us is that when we really understand how our universe is put together, held together, and marches through time and space in such an orderly fashion, we can't help but be directed to the being that created it. Because all of the laws that we try to figure out in our imperfect way through the scientific method are laws that God created. And when we really understand them and we see them for what they are, they they affirm our belief in him. So let me say that there are three kind of quick things that cement my belief in God. One is my personal experience with him. I mean, it's like I know him. I know his power in my life. He talks to me. He's directed me. He reveals things to me. People have asked me, all the time, man, how did you figure out all this stuff that you put in your lectures? And I tell them it has been a tutorial from God over and over again. He just shows me things. He teaches me. He talks to me, and he reveals these things. I mean, and I don't mean that I just go sit on a rock and he, fills my head with things. No, because we each have a duty to work hard to improve our minds, to try and study and fill ourselves with the knowledge. But he takes the knowledge that I have and he expands on it. But so I mentioned this to you the other day. So for instance, DNA, all life on this planet, and for what we know as humans, all life, period, is DNA based. Okay. Well, evolutionary theory says DNA developed randomly, right? That, over millions and millions of years, you had volcanoes and chemicals percolating in mud holes, and gradually you ended up with some DNA, and that DNA got inside of a membrane and created a cell. That is such utter hooey, because DNA is a language. DNA is not a random sequence of bases. It is a language that tells a cell how to build proteins. You cannot develop language through a random process, because a language has to have a syntax, a diction, a vocabulary in order for it to make sense. So number one, you cannot develop a language randomly. That's number one. Number two, when you actually look at the DNA nucleotides that's made up of the sugar, the base, and the phosphate backbone, each of those molecules is so huge and electrically repulsive that they cannot be made outside of a living cell. You have to have enzymes from living cells to hold those different molecules. Well, first of all, to create the molecules themselves, and then hold them in the proper position so that they will bond together at a temperature that's compatible with life. So if you can't make DNA outside of a living cell, how do we end up with DNA-based life? And even if I spot you DNA, okay, I tell people all the time, look, I pronounce people dead in the hospital almost every time I work. Those are people that have all of the DNA, all of the enzymes, and a minute ago they were working just fine. Now they don't. And there's nothing we can do to bring it back. So life is so much more than just, a chemical process. There is something there that goes well beyond chemistry, physics, and it enters the spiritual realm. And people don't want to acknowledge that because they don't want to acknowledge God, but it's the truth. And then finally, and this is kind of the ultimate one, the knock that people have on believing in God is they're like, well, where did God come from? I mean, how can you believe in this, all-powerful being who just, came out of nowhere? So then I ask you, okay, you believe in the Big Bang. 13 billion years ago, dust and gas contracted and then blew up and created the universe as we know it. Where did that giant cosmic egg come from? Where did the dust and gas come from? And if you come up with a theory for where that came from, then where did whatever you come up, that theory, where did that come from? The latest theories of how the universe came to being postulate that at some distant point, the universe simply popped into existence as an infinitesimal point. And in that early few milliseconds of the universe's existence, so the universe creates itself, there was this special particle called an inflaton that made that single particle inflate itself into all of the matter that we can see distributed throughout the universe. That's literally what people believe, or what they say they believe. My point is, how is that any more plausible than God? And whether you accept that God is real and exists, or you believe in your giant cosmic egg, the one thing you cannot get around, since we're all here talking to each other, is that there was something that always simply existed, It had no beginning and it won't have an end. And we will never be able to explain that. So you get to the same place either way you go. And I know I'm out of time.
Bless you. Dr. Milton Mills, no wonder, you are my brother from another mother. I'm just so crazy about you and so happy that you are part of our wonderful world here in this phrase I heard the other day, part of the life community. So turning all this liveliness back to Reverend Erica. Yeah, we've got Compassion in Action coming up.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Mills and Victoria, for that very inspiring interview. So you know where we are now in our service. We've been sitting for a little while, although we did get up to do our Touching the Earth, those of you who got up. But this is the moment where we take a few moments to stretch a little bit, just feel into the body. If something needs to shake it out. Something needs to give a little wiggle. And sometimes it's fun in these moments to be inspired by some of our favorite other than human beings out there. I always like in these moments to think about the birds and stretch my arms out, stretch my back out. I'm seeing some people doing some twisting. That looks nice. Just give it a second to give your body a little treat here. Roll your shoulders. All right, so we're going to move to our Compassion in Action section. And I'm very excited for the interview we have online for today. There's a particular person that you've been looking at for almost a year, and we've never gotten to bring him into the spotlight. And so we are going to do that today. So I'm excited to introduce you in this capacity to our Zoom tech, Phil DeJean. He also goes by Checker Phil. And in addition to being our Zoom tech for the Compassionate Consortium, as well as other vegan events, he's also a teacher of art at a New York City high school. He's the host of a long-running checkerboard kids show on Manhattan Neighborhood Network TV, and he is a master vegan lifestyle coach and educator from Main Street Vegan Academy. One of Phil's big claims to fame is that he lost 100 pounds, and he's been able to maintain that weight loss for over a decade. So welcome, Phil.
Right on. It's a pleasure to be here. Here, I as a visual learner, I like to show and tell. So let me show here for a second. Bang. Here's the picture. Here's me at my highest weights over here. Now note over here, you see I'm wearing suspenders here. I couldn't get a belt big enough to get me over there. And of course, I'm there in the first picture holding up a finger of how many trays of food I would like to eat. Sorry,
and you said that you actually were 300 pounds at the time, right, Phil?
Yeah, 313 pounds. That was my maximum weight. Sure.
Such an inspiring and remarkable story. So how do you see, because we're here at the Compassion Consortium, how do you see your spiritual life connected to your weight loss?
Well, I would definitely say that I couldn't do this without God, or my concept of God. I was brought up as Catholic, but going through this thing, I felt a little disheartened. Those were so many different things I would eat over. I'd eat over like my parents got divorced, or this or that, or I felt like there were so many different things I felt sad, or I was getting bullied, or all these different things. And then to be able to set all these things aside and come to the conclusion, get a good relationship with God and get in that, that was very helpful to me to be able to get that.
And now yeah, go ahead, Phil.
I'll say this. A lot of it came together when my mom, she was dying at 50 years old in the hospital, and on her deathbed, she was telling me I had to change my life, and I didn't understand how to do that. I didn't understand there was options I can do, And luckily for me, after she passed, I was able to slowly but surely, with God's help, praying about it, slowly but surely, all the different puzzle pieces came together to be in a position where I would get to live a healthier lifestyle.
And so your mom was able to give you that word of inspiration. I know now you give a lot of words of inspiration to your students. So how do you talk to your students about veganism?
Well, it's funny because we're not really allowed to talk about this, and as you'll know, in the education system right now, you're not allowed to talk about a lot of things. But I'll keep it to the thing. A lot of times, students sometimes ask me, they hear through the grapevine, they say, "Hey, Mister, I heard that you used to be 300 pounds." And I was like, "Yeah," or they're always like, "Don't you or miss like Popeyes or something?" Or like, "Don't you miss this or don't you miss that?" I was just like, not necessarily, where they love taking about, what about pork or what about beef? I was like, oh, you mean pigs? Pigs, and I would be able to give some facts, like some pigs are smarter than a 3-year-old, at certain points, and just to bring all these things that they sing to their kids, or these things like, or if they talk about like, what about chicken? I'm like, those boy chickens are thrown into these machination things, and to bring these up, oh, I don't want to hear about that. I didn't want to hear about those things either. I didn't want to know about those things either, and I definitely didn't want to see it. But I just wanted to say, I just say, I don't want to hurt any animals. But do you miss this, or do you miss the taste of that? There's so many beautiful and delicious things out there that I can make the choice not to eat things that involve animals getting hurt. And I just present it like that. I'm not trying to like beat anybody over the head with it, but though a lot of people feel very defensive, actually a lot of adults, kids are more open to it and they ask me about it, but adults are always like, no, but bacon though, just like all these different things. And it's just to be able to, just to be open. It's like, I don't want to hurt anything. I don't want to hurt any animals. And ultimately I don't want to hurt myself. I've seen too many people get I had a best friend get legs amputated. My aunt just passed. She had both her legs amputated, diabetes. And at the end, still wouldn't give up the meat or things like along those lines. And it is what it is. But it's just like situations where you see the people smoking and they're just like, oh, I'll quit when it's prudent for me to do so, but it's moving so slow they don't notice it. And then all of a sudden you see they get the throat cancer and then they're like, well, might as well keep smoking. And they sit there and they smoke through the hole in their thing. It's, alas, it is a thing.
Well, Phil, thank you so much. The way you always light up a space with your enthusiasm and your smile. And just a reminder, this segment is meant to highlight people's compassion in action. And so we just want to thank you, Phil, for putting your both tech savviness and your compassion into action by supporting us here on the back end in this community. So with that, I will turn it over to Rev Sarah for some prayers.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Dr. Milton Mills. Thank you, Fredessa. Have you all just take a deep breath. In today's service, we've explored a lot of themes around the ideas of love, justice, and wellness, and peace in a really, really messy world. So today I'm going to light 3 candles, bringing sacred fire to 3 intentions that I'm hoping we can take away from today. Love, justice, and peace. And I'm going to invite you, as I am offering these prayers, as you feel called to, Phil, if you would open the chat so that everybody can have at it, if you have not already. If you feel like you would like to add anything into the chat at any point, any prayers, if prayer is not a great word for you, any intentions or any desires, any good feelings, any loving kindness, whatever, we're prayer-ish around here. So whatever you feel called to add in, please do. So the first candle is love. So it's red because I didn't want to get more creative than that. And it smells like a crisp apple. Yes, it's a cruelty-free candle. So I'd like you to bring to mind fresh fruit, plants, good nutrition, loving our bodies, loving our minds, loving our spirits, taking care of ourselves as a form of love, and loving others. And as Rosario Dawson and all of the quote unquote ugly creatures who I think are quite beautiful and stylish, to think about loving those who we think might be ugly or unkind or evil. How do we do that? How do we do that? We pray for guidance. How do I love when I'm really, really, really upset? I'm going to light a second candle for justice. This smells like fresh pine. Smell trees, the earth healed, the earth flourishing. We pray for an end of cruelty to everyone. End of horrific violence like that perpetrated on Ahmaud Arbery will end. We pray for the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia, that they become overwhelmed with a desire for peace. We pray for animals who are suffering in the name of vivisection or research and development or pharma trials. May humans stop animal testing in favor of computer modeling and effective methods of ethical medicine. Please bring us animal-free solutions to our healthcare problems. We set forth an intention that humans will learn to treat other humans, other than human beings, and the earth with compassion and respect. All of these prayers that you have put into the side, which because I was long-winded today, I can't read all of them, but I will be saving the chat and praying them along after the service. And this final candle smells like daybreak. It smells fresh and clean and peaceful. It doesn't smell like blood or gunpowder or bombs. It doesn't smell like labs. It doesn't smell like all of the things that are not peaceful and are based in violence. So I guess I made us a trinity, folks. Here we go. Phil, if we could end our prayer the way we always do, with the closing prayer on screen, and I invite you all into this first. Here we go. Taking a deep breath. May all creatures everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, words, and actions of our lives contribute to this happiness and this freedom for all. Thank you all for prayer-ishing with me. Over to you, William.
All right, I am unmuted, right? Yes. Okay, so we want to thank you for joining us today. And I want to tell you a little bit about what's coming up in the hope that you will join us again in the future. So our next Sunday service will be on March 27th with Chris Gerksness as our guest. She is a vegan Wiccan living in Salem, Massachusetts. Salem is such a great place for Wiccans to live. And she's going to help us celebrate the Ostera spring equinox. So I've always been very interested in Wicca. And when I was in the seminary, I studied it. It's a modern day nature-based pagan religion. And most observations by the various Wiccan groups include the festival celebrations of the solstices and the equinoxes, the honoring of a male god and a female goddess, and the incorporation of herbalism and other natural objects into rituals. So it was developed in England during the first half of the 20th century and introduced to the public by Gerald Gardner, who was a British civil servant. He wrote a lot of books, and I read, I guess, well, what I think is probably his main book, which is Witchcraft Today. And I would recommend that to all of you. So now here comes the good part. And this event I'm going to describe to you now, if you don't do anything else for the rest of the year, you must join us for our Compassionate Book Talk on Tuesday, April 12th at 8 p.m. We are going to feature the book Sacred Send-Offs, an Animal Chaplain's Advice for Surviving Animal Loss, Making Life Meaningful, and Healing the Planet by our very own Reverend Sarah Bowen. So this book explores human relationships with pets, wild creatures, animal astronauts, marine life, farmed animals, and other sentient beings. And along the way, Reverend Sarah shares her insights for sustaining lives, honoring deaths, and managing the emotions that arise when we lose an animal whom we love. So please join us. It's going to be great and extremely interesting. So in closing, I'll just say, if you enjoyed the service and want to support future Compassion Consortium programming, we obviously encourage you to donate on our website. And donations may be made both via PayPal and most credit and debit cards. And just to reiterate what I said in January, we have good news regarding our tax exempt status. And the good news is that we have a tax exempt status. So the IRS has approved us as a charitable organization, meaning that your donation is now tax deductible, and is tax deductible retroactively to the date we incorporated, February 13th, 2021. So I think that is all I need to announce, and I'm going to turn it back to you, Reverend Sarah.
Thank you, William, from the hospital bed. Your commitment to this organization is amazing and inspiring. And you look pretty good there in that collar in that hospital bed, doing your advocacy work over there on behalf of all beings. Thank you all for joining us today at Compassion Consortium. We hope to see you next month or another month. We hope to see you often.